Between the hills, the stars, the sky, the river so clear, river so clear.
Let us join in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer as we deepen into our service and share our opening words this morning from Mark Morrison Reed entitled, The Task of the Religious Community. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is in the church that it assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be done, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Our program today is a welcome community for displaced people. 3 Sundays ago, Carol Jean Larson announced that a Ukrainian refugee family now living in Lithuania is seeking sponsorship to enter the United States under a special refugee program. Our congregation asked for more information, so Marcia and Bill Patire are here to share that experience with sponsorship via the federal program, humanitarian parole, and present on ways in which groups such as ours can get involved in welcoming refugees. Marcia is a retired school teacher who has taught English to newly arrived immigrants, and Bill is a retired economic developer who understands the need to grow North Dakota's rural population. Bill and Marcia are active in 2 groups, North Dakotans for Ukraine, and Catch, Communities Acting Together for Change and Hope. These groups work to bring individuals and families displaced by the war, any war, or other life-threatening situations to North Dakota, where there is a demand for workers.
After I retired, I started working with Lutheran Social Services, asking if working with new refugees that came and teaching English and teaching them how to drive and all the things that people and new arrivals need. And that was how I kind of initially got involved. Early in 2023, a group from the UCC met with some Presbyterians, and we invited other people to come. And after church, we went through a presentation with them about the humanitarian parole program. And so we started a group that met, we elected some officers, started a bank account, and began North Dakotans for Ukraine. And at that time, I went through the Welcome.us program, which is just this incredible training program. And we worked at sponsoring our first person.
CAT is Communities Acting Together for Change and Hope. So I'm a compulsive organizer, and I think I was probably in a previous life, I was a border collie. I want to chase people into groups because I believe in the power of human cooperation. And I know that I can't do this by myself. And I'm from Wells County, a very rural place. We had 480 acres. We milked cows by hand. We didn't have electricity when I was born. We didn't have running water in the house. And I became the economic development director for George Center. So that's a long way to go. And I've been to this church frequently, and I love you guys. And I'm just so overjoyed to be with you because I know you share that idea that human beings have within them something wonderful. And we just need to discover it and put it together. So CATCH is, on the first slide, what is CATCH? It stands for Communities Acting Together. So it's my hope that communities, and I'll define that, will act together. The 2 verbs, change and hope, Hope is a pull force, change is the action we do to make that hope real. And it's an organization of economic development people who need workers, and faith-based people who have decent compassion, and like the songs we sang today mean something. So why do we recruit foreign-born people? Well, the birth rate in the United States is 1.6. To sustain our population, it needs to be 2.1. So the death rate is higher than the birth rate, and without foreign-born workers, our economy collapses. So that's just the reality of it. And there are currently thousands of foreign-born workers in North Dakota. There's 4,200 foreign-born college students in North Dakota, 3,000 farm workers, 3,000 temporary construction workers, and perhaps 500 humanitarian parolees in North Dakota, at least 100 in Bismarck. And so, hey, we understand we're children of immigrants or grandchildren of immigrants. And an important point to make is we understand immigration is a political issue. But we're not operating at the national level. We're operating under a legal system that allows us to do what we're already doing, and we can increase that. What's new about what we're talking to you today, and when you go through the learning programs, traditionally a refugee is somebody who has escaped a country and is in some type of refugee camp, and they're vetted, and the State Department determines they can come to the United States. And they decide where they go. And typically the federal government would contract with people like Lutheran Social Services or other agencies, Church World Services, and they would place them. And there's federal programs that support that placement. Here's what's new. The Humanitarian Parole Program allows you as a private citizen to sponsor somebody from one of 5 countries to come and live in your country for 2 years. They just extended that 2-year period for another 2 years in the case of the Ukraine parolees. Now, the big news, we won't spend time talking about it, but the big news is that Welcome.us is moving to the Welcome Corps, which will allow you as a private citizen to sponsor a refugee. There are different programs. The sponsoring a refugee requires more commitment financially from you, and there's more rules about that because it's not just a casual humanitarian parole that the person could maybe go back. But that's the promise that really drew my attention, because that's what rural communities can do. Before, all the refugees went to urban places where they had a Walmart where you could work there without speaking English. And we just couldn't compete in a rural community, even though we needed them. Why do we need to form another organization? That's one of the questions. I don't mean to disparage the federal government, but they're messed up. We're not putting them down, we need them. We've talked to people who've been in refugee camps trying to get to the United States for 11 years, and at state government. Again, not bad-mouthing them. They spend the $7 million a biennium of federal appropriations to support refugees, but they don't do it themselves. They don't pass North Dakota dollars on to support refugees. It's all federal money at the moment. We do have a Department of Legal Immigration. It's brand new. They're still figuring out what to do. We need to do is take the leadership from rural places, this church, the church I go to, United Church of Christ, and we need to form an organization that advocates exactly what I'm saying. Let us do this. It doesn't have to be a government thing. Let us, as citizens who have compassion and decency and need workers and people who live in our rural communities, let us get organized and go to the legislature and say, this is what will work for us. Catch is financed by a grant from the Bush Foundation through Strengthen ND. We received a grant for 3 years, $100,000 a year. We've spent about half of that, a little over half of that grant the first year. We hired an executive director who worked for us for 6 months. We just finished a 90-day period searching for a new executive director after he resigned. We interviewed 4 candidates. Yesterday, we're going to make an offer to one of those candidates, and I've been filling in as an interim executive director. But the hope is that 20 organizations like you and like the United Church of Christ will join Catch at $500 a membership, and 100 individuals at $100 each would join Catch. And that's just a local commitment. We want to keep the $100,000 per year from the Bush Foundation and raise another 80,000 or so from other sources to pay the expenses of rolling out this organization, hiring an executive director. And one of the primary roles of the executive director is to help find sponsors in rural places and develop those support organizations that will make that work in those rural communities.
So our ask from you guys today is to become a partner with other faith groups who are interested in helping people. Bring people here to North Dakota during a conflict or a crisis in their home country. We would ask you to join Catch to help bring refugees and immigrants to North Dakota communities, and become a sponsor by filling out paperwork with help from our group to bring a family that you will mentor. And aside from that, there's also opportunities to donate items and materials as families arrive. So they'll need kitchen items, bedroom furniture, tables, all of which can be stored at Global Neighbors. They have a very steep staircase to go down to the basement underneath the building down on Broadway. So those are some things that you could be involved in. So I went through the program here, and it's called welcome.us, Welcome Connect. It has a wealth of information. One of the things, as I went through it, it talked about you can bring people here, you can welcome them to your community, but you cannot ask them to be a part of your faith group. You can invite them, but it's totally up to them. You're not their parent. You can be their support. You can give them encouragement. You can help them with things, but their life decisions are still up to them. And I thought they made some really important points where you're not really taking over for them. They're grown-ups and they have children, and you're not supplanting those services. So this is the site where you can get that. If you Google welcome.us, it'll take you to this.
Across the world, over 110 million people have been forced to flee their homes. And over the past 2 years, more than 2 million Americans have volunteered to become welcomers. When Kabul fell back into Taliban control, Welcome.us launched a massive collective effort rallying Americans to help Afghans find safety. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Americans opened their doors to more than 170,000 Ukrainians fleeing war.
Being a sponsor, it's about having the vision of the future, and it's like the ripple effect. You help one person, and then that person becomes resourceful, and then they can help others.
As crises deepened in Central America, Americans welcomed over 270,000 newcomers from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela through sponsorship. This outpouring of welcome led to the U.S. State Department launching the Welcome Corps in January of 2023, making it possible for Americans to welcome refugees from around the world.
I'm a proud sponsor of the Welcome Course program. I believe that as a refugee, I was given the opportunity to resettle in this wonderful country, and I should be able to lend the same help to others.
Thanks to you, more than 400,000 people seeking refuge have found safety and security in communities with the support of sponsors in 11,000 zip codes across all 50 states. And you didn't do it alone. Friends, family, colleagues, service clubs, faith, and veterans groups have rallied together, helping refugees settle into communities as our new neighbors. And in the end, it changed us, too.
When we look back in history at times when there were terrible things happening, we always wonder what we would have done if we were there. And this is your chance to answer that question. you can make a difference.
This is some of what's happening right now in North Dakota. There's the Catch organization, which Bill already talked about. Our group from the United Church of Christ. I almost joined here, you. And with the Presbyterians. Global Neighbors. They are doing an immense amount of work, and they have been welcoming people from South America and from the Ukraine. Botno Ministerial Association, if Bill wants to talk a little bit about that.
A year ago in November, we met with Botno, and we met with the Ministerial Association. There are 5 churches. And I suppose our meeting with the Ministerial Association had lay people as well as pastors. And they said, yes, well, they had each church voted separately to join. So the Ministerial Association acted as the physical hub, and they raised $40,000. The Presbyterian Methodist ministers, a federated parish, served as the sponsor, and they have their first successful family. They're going to sponsor another family. They were very patient, but as you could imagine, with those 5 churches all agreeing to do it, they picked up the city council, they picked up the county commissioners, they picked up the school district, so they were very patient to explain what they were doing. They didn't rush it. And Beth Kelsey, the minister of the Federated Church, is just a wonderful human being. She has a PhD in counseling as well as a theological degree, and she's a joy to work with. But that's a wonderful example of how community can approach that. We mentioned the Office of Legal Immigration. Global Friends in Grand Forks is extremely active. They're working very closely with a church that's in East Grand Forks. So they're very active folks. Global Refuge in Fargo is what used to be Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. They've changed their name. The North Dakota Department of Human Services Refugee Resettlement Program, I mentioned them. They're the ones that pass through the federal dollars. Those dollars are available for refugees, not parolees. So there's a distinction there. The 2 different programs, they support refugees who are official refugees. They can't provide support for parolees. But Holly Triskadali runs that. She's from Wilton. She went to the Ukrainian Catholic Church in Wilton. She is Ukrainian by background, and she's wonderful to work with. I'm probably forgetting others. The GROW program, very exciting program. It recently closed. You probably saw it in the paper. The oil companies, the Petroleum Council sponsored this. They hired Brent Sanford to run it, and they spent a lot of money providing caseworkers to help the people they were recruiting, but they only recruited the employee, not the family. And so we're going to be talking to you about an individual who said, I'm not coming without my family. And the family we sponsored, in both cases, the 2 families we sponsored have employees working for oil companies already here, which made it very much easier for us to sponsor the families.
Putting a face on the work we're doing. On the left, the Solohov family, there's 2 brothers that work here, one with the oil company, and he lives in Killdeer, and his other brother who works for a farmer in Glen Ullin. And his parents lived 17 kilometers from the Russian border. And they contacted us and said, we want our parents to get out of there. And they're 63 and 60, I believe. And so we filled out the paperwork for them back in November, and they will be arriving in Chicago on April 5th. And they have not flown in over 40 years, and they're quite nervous about the trip. They don't read or speak English, so the alphabet isn't the same. So arriving at an airport with all the gate numbers is going to be very nerve-wracking for them. But I suggested that they say they needed a wheelchair. to make the transfer. And that's how he made the arrangements for the plane ticket. And he and his brother are going to Chicago to meet his parents, so they don't have to do a transfer here. So they have got an apartment for them starting April 1st in Dickinson. The other family that's there, and I don't know if Bill wants to try to pronounce their last name, but Alexander, the husband in the green shirt there, had been working in North Dakota for the last 13 months. And he works for Bracco Brothers or something like that in Dickinson that's related to the oil industry. And I did the paperwork to bring his wife and 2 kids, Alina, Ivan, and Ilya. And 2 weeks ago, today, we drove out to Dickinson and met them. And I had said, we'll come out. He had written an invitation to us. And I said, we can come out, but no work. We'll eat before we get there. And he wrote back, sorry, we're going to feed you. And so she had only been here a few days, less than a week. And she had this lovely lunch with borscht and a beautiful cake with layers and layers of custard filling between them. And she sent a big chunk of that home with us. It hasn't all been easy. Right off the bat, we formed our organization, North Dakotans for Ukraine. We filled out the paperwork and sponsored a woman named Alina and her daughter. There was a couple of us that got together at my house visiting with her, and we planned her trip here. It was a trip from Kiev by bus to Warsaw, because you cannot fly in and out of Ukraine at this time. A layover in Warsaw. From there, she was to fly to the Netherlands, from the Netherlands directly to Denver. We booked a hotel for an overnight stay, and then a flight from Denver to Bismarck. And it was all going pretty smoothly until connections started getting missed, and just lots of difficulty. She would write and say, I'm exhausted. Oh, I know one other thing that put a little kink in it. The day she's leaving, she tells us she has a dog coming with her. And one of the people that's a part of our group works for the U.S. Veterinarian Service and has a degree in communicable diseases, mostly dealing with animals. And she said she can't bring her dog. And I said, you can't, I write back, you can't bring the dog. You've got to leave it in Poland. And she said, no, I'm not. She had checked out all this information about bringing the dog. And so in the end, there would have been no way in Denver for her to bring the dog through. They don't have service there. She ended up rerouting herself to LA. She gets off the plane. She contacts me and says, we're exhausted. We need to spend the night before we go on. And I wrote back and I said, you have to do whatever they tell you at the desk, because otherwise we have to rebook your ticket. And I've never heard another word from her. So she and her daughter and puppy disappeared at that point. So it was heart-wrenching. I mean, I wrote to her many times, and finally I said, if you need help, reach out to me. But so that was almost a year ago now. I mean, it was July of last year. So that wasn't a very good success. Whoops. We do have works in progress. We are working at sponsoring a young man who left Afghanistan. There were 5 good friends who all ended up in a refugee camp together. And they it was a UN-sponsored refugee camp. And one of the families ended up here, Mohammed and Sadiqa, and their 3 daughters. Sadiqa's the mother and Mohammed's the son. Some of you may have heard his story. He's a student in nursing out at University of Mary. He wasn't able to go to school when they were living in Pakistan. And he had a friend who was Pakistani who went to school, and then he would teach him his lessons at night. And then he would go home and teach his sisters. So when they came to Bismarck, quite a few years ago now. They weren't that far behind. The kids graduated on time and have all headed off to college and doing quite well. But he contacted me one day and he said, I have a good friend who was a part of our group in Pakistan. And he had chosen to try to get out by going through Indonesia. So I think it's 11 years now. He's been in a UN camp in Indonesia, and they cannot work, they cannot go to school. And so the other 4 men, who were all young men at the time, are helping to support him. They're sending him money. And he asked if Bill and I would be a part of a group that would sign on to bring him as a refugee seeking asylum to the US. So the paperwork's been filed on that. Another family that we are working with is this young family from Ukraine, and it's a wife, husband, and their son. And he has an engineering degree. She's got a degree in economics and finance. And he's on hold waiting to see if we can work to find a sponsor here. And we're also working with Natalia, who is Ukrainian and is at Global Neighbors. She has a friend from college who's trying to get out of Ukraine, and she had requested sponsorship for her, but she's already got her name on 13 applications, and so they didn't grant her. So Bill and I added our name, and my sister-in-law and brother-in-law added their name, and so now there's 5 of us asking for sponsorship for her. We've had many, many successes. We've been able to meet Natalia at Global Neighbors. The Jeff Kotsako family, a friend of ours from church, had told us that this family was moving and they had a lot of furniture. So we went over to their house and they packed up loads of dishes and kitchen things and bedding, and we moved stuff, and they've been just a real source. The person who was helping do their estate sale now calls me when she has things that she doesn't think will be easily sold at a sale. So we get calls from people all the time saying, oh, we've got furniture. And there's just North Dakotans all over the place who are willing to be sponsors, to step up, to help people. And it reminds us that there's many, many, many good people out there, and they feel the call to love our neighbors as ourselves. Thank you very much.
Our closing words this morning are Extinguishing the Chalice by Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Put a little love in your heart. Put a little love in your heart. You want the world to know you won't let hatred grow. Put a little love in your heart. I hope when you decide this will be your guide. Put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place. And the world will be a better place.